Hi, this is Ian Adema, the writer and director of the fan film Moon Knight Origins. You're listening to the Into the Night Moon Knight podcast.
Yes, Loony listeners, welcome back. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. This is a special bonus episode, and you are joined by your High Priest of Khonshu, Ray. G'day, everyone. And I thought I'd slip this little one in there just because, hey, Khonshu wants us to do shows based on the phases of the moon, but I wanted to get these guys in quick sticks. So you'll be listening to a spotlight on Moon Knight Origins, a fan film. And I have with me two great guests here. First, writer and director Ian Adema and the actor playing Marc Spector, Steve Huff. Welcome both, guys.
Thank you.
Excited to be here.
Cool. Well, yeah. I'm very excited as well to chat about your fan film. First off, of course, a big shout out and a thank you to our sponsors. So our gracious patronies, those listed as co-producers and executive producers on each of our episodes. These are the Patreon members who have, throw some coin our way. So a big thank you to Daniel, Justin, Derek, Kyle, Wayne, Jordan, Josh, James, Anthony, and Michael. Thank you so much. Also, Fringe Knight by Daniel Doing, an original indie comic based on Erie, Pennsylvania's very own mysterious superhero. And of course, our other two custodian sponsors, Hello Headphones, empowering gamers to play at their best, and Dreamland Comics from Illinois, the superhero superstore. Well, gentlemen, I am very happy that you are both here for this show. Moon Knight Origins. Now, this is cool. We've had some fan films, and I've chatted with some directors and writers before on their fan films. But I guess, Ian, would you like to let the listeners know a bit about Moon Knight Origins first, and how it came about?
Yeah. So it's always interesting, kind of trying to approach a fan film in the first place, because you're approaching a copyrighted IP. But Moon Knight was kind of one of those characters that, for me personally, I remember finding out about. I think actually, probably from seeing a comic at the library. Okay. But it would have been probably somewhere in the 90s. Okay. But I remember it was when they really started getting Moon Knight to be grittier, and it fascinated me. And after that, for a long time, I just kind of forgot about Moon Knight. But then after time, I remember it's like, this guy was really awesome. And it was really one of my favorite characters thinking back. And probably about 6 years ago, Steve and I met. Over time talking, found that, he was also a really big Moon Knight fan. And as someone, a writer and director, myself over the years, it was one of those characters that once we started talking, when I started thinking about a fan film, I was like, this would be really awesome. And Steve had been working on cosplays for Moon Knight. And we just started talking more and more about doing it. And we just finally recently got to a point where we were able to move forward on something. But it was something I really thought of when I was thinking about what direction to take between resources and finances and even just what's been put out there. I realized nobody had really attempted to explore the origin story on screen. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the direction of, I wanted to take the direction of, what have we not seen on screen, since they did at least start putting stuff, in animated shows, like Spider-Man and stuff on Disney, but not really live action. But then it's also really weird right now because we're making this fan film in the process of Disney having announced and continuing to announce more about their show.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that daunting in any way? I mean, like you've got the wheels rolling, so to speak, already, but like it must feel, like, oh, this is that a blessing, do you think, or do you think it's something else?
I think it's a blessing and a curse. In just the sense that when you're making a fan film, when the people who officially own that IP are suddenly making it at the same time, you kind of have this gap of people who want to see fan films, but also at the time kind of want to wait to see what Marvel does and first, because a lot of times people make fan films after the fact of something coming out.
Right.
But at the same time, it's a bit of a blessing because Moon Knight already being a lesser known character to a lot of people from Marvel, Disney also pushing that garners more attention already for people to hear, oh, I heard about Disney doing that. Let's find out more.
Yeah, that's true. That's true as well. I mean, it's so interesting because, as you say, he is very, probably in the months and the years to come, he'll be a lot more well known, but he's a very obscure character. So when you mentioned that you had that common thread with Steve, it seems that it's such a kind of rare thing, to bump into someone that actually likes Moon Knight. Steve, you cosplayed, and you followed the comics as well?
I did. I really started getting into Moon Knight back with the whole volume 2, the Fist of Khonshu.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Good. Wow. Yeah.
Back in the early 80s. And I actually, I do remember as a younger kid reading the issue of Werewolf at Night or Werewolf by Night where he first pops up. But, it was... It was a character that I kind of liked because he wasn't, as flashy, and yes, he has superpowers, but that kind of goes back and forth how much he or how little and whatnot. So, he wasn't just like your regular character. Then, of course, over the years, he got a little different, and like Ian, I had kind of drifted out a little bit, and then getting back into comics and all of that as an adult, really started getting more into it. And then, we've been talking about making a Moon Knight project probably since we met. So, we're finally getting around to doing it right when, like he was saying, the Marvel one is going to come out. But, we're just going to press ahead and...
Yeah.
I always wanted to. I was always fascinated by the character, so I always wanted to kind of explore a little bit more about the man behind the mask, I guess.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, and I think it is a blessing because it will generate kind of a little bit of an interest in the fan films as well. Like it's not like just this totally obscure character that people can like, who the hell is this guy? Why would I even bother checking this out? If they come across, say, your teaser. Now there's a little bit more exposure for him, which is good. There's a new comic book series out. Of course, all of this is generated by Marvel to get their big snowball of a marketing thing happening, for Moon Knight. So it's all good for the fans. And you mentioned, so with Moon Knight Origins, you have some funding, in place through Indiegogo. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I think one of the especially hardest parts about trying to do a fan film in LA is, unlike some other parts of the country, because so much film happens out here, there's a lot more restrictions. And it's a lot harder to get things without funding. Even locations, that in some places, that you might just show up and they're like, oh yeah, just let us know what you're doing, as long as we know you're cool. In LA, even if it's outside of the city, just in California, most of the time it's, unless you're, like a really tiny indie crew flying under the radar doing just like normal stuff, they want, money for permits or insurance or, something else. So on top of that, building costumes and props and everything else, essentially the idea of the Indiegogo was to assist with being able to especially cover initially those things like locations and props and costume materials, as well as also, being able to compensate the number of people working, because, we have a lot of industry professionals, assisting us in this project. But that's the other thing that's always interesting too about a crowdfunding campaign, is they're so common now that there is a interesting learning curve there when it comes to getting it out to people and, getting people to see it who aren't necessarily just your friends and family.
Yeah.
Because so much of it really comes down more to anything to who can you get to see it. And so that's been especially for me, an interesting learning curve, because I've done a couple other crowdfunds for just my own personal projects, but this is the first one that it's like, I knew there was a fan base there. And I've basically been doing most of the social media outreach myself, which is not my primary forte.
So, well, I'm sure you've got plenty on your plate already, ready to then have to deal with like social media stuff and getting the name out there. So, I mean, you're doing a great job. I mean, Loony listeners, there will be links in the show notes, of course, to where you can find the Indiegogo page, and that also has a link to the teaser. And Ian and Steve, I've just got to say, the teaser looks fantastic. I mean, you're talking about locations. I always wonder, because I fund, a couple of like Kickstarters and stuff, and GoFundMe's as well, and generally they have to bring to the table, similar to like yourself, like a teaser, and has to kind of look good and bring them in, and locations look awesome, look very cool in your teaser as well. I love the scope of it. So I guess, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, I'm assuming then, that you have to invest in early on. There's only so far that you can ask favors of mates. But as you say as well, I guess in LA, it's a lot harder to get those locations. So, I think with all those kind of restrictions, you guys have done really well so far. Let's hope that, you can push on with the funding in the Indiegogo page. How long have they got? How long have we got for funding?
So the campaign ends on August 19th.
August 19th. Okay, cool. Well, this will come out pretty soon. I'm aiming for either the 10th or the 11th of August. So it's, I believe it's the 9th. I'm ahead of you. I'm in the future here, guys. So, sorry.
So by the time this comes out, we'll have about a week to finish pushing it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'll plug it on our social media platforms as well. And Loonies, definitely check it out. I've been plugging it for the last few weeks, in our shows, and there've been links in our show notes. So hopefully, it's picked up a few interested parties, but we'll go and see. Now, I guess you mentioned as well previous works, but I'll jump to Steve first. Steve, before jumping onto Moon Knight Origins, what were the other kind of sort of projects you had been working on in the lead up to it? Are you an action guy, or you mentioned off air that you are a stunt choreographer as well? So what sort of genre do you lean towards?
So I'm a fight choreographer mainly.
Sorry. Yep.
And, I do a lot of movement. One of the things that I kind of specialize in is working with people on not just, the moves of the fight, but how to move like a seasoned fighter. A good example of that is, if that high level assassin walks into the room, even if, they're not drawing a gun or whatever, the audience should be able to look and say, oh, that's the badass, right? Just by the way it's moving. And a lot of times it's just things that people that have training, there's a certain way they move. So that's kind of what I do is I build fights, but then I'll also go beyond and help the actors with, moving like they've been doing it for years. And then from time to time, I'm an actor myself, and I tend to stick to the action genre. I think anybody's going to see me as romantic lead anytime soon.
Well, I mean, it sounds like as well, like you've got an involved role in at least Moon Knight Origins. Do you find it difficult to to juggle the two, being the lead in this, as well as having to, I guess, have an oversight of potentially all the other characters that are involved in fights?
Well, it is difficult, but again, it's one of those things where it comes back to it's a passion project. Mm-hmm. I'm coming off of a 98-hour work week.
Holy moly!
And going right back into building props and getting things ready. Mm-hmm. We were doing this, so it's hard. But it's worth it when it's something that you really enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you do what you have to do to be able to do what you want to do. And this is one of those things where, I'll put in the extra hours because I really want to see this done. Mm. And I didn't mind the fact that, like you were speaking about locations, we're driving 4.5 hours out to a location. And like Ian was saying, none of us are getting paid for this. This is all, because we wanted it to look like it looks. You're not going to get that just anywhere. So part of what makes it difficult with this project is we're really being meticulous and we're really trying to do it right. And if that means we get 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, then so as long as it looks good.
Well, I guess, with 3 or 4 hours sleep, Steve, you can pull off that, really dogged look of Marc Spector that's required from time to time. So
that's when we were in the desert, and I was like, "Are you ready for me to tap into crazy? Because I'm
yeah. So come on, Ian, let me know when you want crazy. I'm ready. I'm ready for it." Ian, previous works as well. You've mentioned you've had other independent, like creator-owned works. What were they? Like, what were some of them?
Yeah, so I've done numerous short films. I've also done one indie feature that, since then I've learned a ton, because that was like 8-9 years ago now that I did that. But a lot of it, most of my shorts tend to be 20 minutes or less, usually somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes, but a variety of, drama, fantasy, psychological thriller. My big two things I love the most are psychological thriller and fantasy, mm-hmm. which is funny because thinking about Moon Knight, realistically you could tap into a lot of the psychological side, but just with the current resources, I found that I could potentially draw out an origin short film and just make it crazy long. But there's a reality that, at some point you've got to make it concise and to a point, or else you lose everybody's interest. Mm-hmm. And it just didn't work with what this story was to include a lot of the psychological multiple personality aspects that I would have really loved to include. But I think especially loving that idea of psychological thriller and having done some of that in the past, still leans into putting that into some of the subtleties of even directing Steve into, this is how we should, work on exploring the different personalities mm-hmm. of Marc Spector, of what we are able to, which in this one, we're trying to explore Marc Spector, Moon Knight, and Jake Lockley.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, that I was going to ask as well. Then for the origins, look, the I guess the premise is on the tin there, origins. Mm-hmm. But how far did you go with it? I'm just kind of thinking. I see, for instance, like Steve in that teaser, your costume of Mark walking in the desert to me reminds me a lot of the Lemire run. I'm not sure if that was where you took that kind of costume leaning from. Are there any twists of your own to the origins, to the story that you're telling, or are there particular runs where you take great leanings towards or influences from?
Well, we've kind of been pulling from all over, but yes, good catch on that. Was kind of where it was a cross between what do I have in the costume closet and through, and it was like one of those where I was like, I can pull that look off, and
it's very good, mind you. Sorry.
That's one of the things. I'm also looking at stuff always as a cosplayer. So what can I wear to a con? And a costume of myself as somebody, that how easier does it get?
That'd be good. I reckon if you wear that costume to a cosplay, like that Marc Spector in the desert, you'll get so many points from Moon Knight fans just going, "Hey, I know that." That'd be really cool. So you draw on from a lot of people, and you're saying, Ian, you're keeping it, which is not uncommon with a lot of the comic book runs, where they do focus on one aspect and not necessarily try and encapsulate everything. So were there anything? Was there anything beyond like Moon Knight that you both maybe researched on, in particular, what it seems to be with his origins, the Egyptian side of things? Was there anything that you kind of looked into with Khonshu and that? Does any of that inform the overall plot?
Story-wise, I mean, I've always been a little fascinated by Egyptology. Mm-hmm. But I will admit, for this, I didn't do necessarily tons of research into extra stuff outside of the Moon Knight comics, though there is a lot of stuff. Even the more I even see, stuff in Egypt of old Egyptian tombs and everything else, that sometimes I'm like, I kind of wish we would have just been able to go film something in Egypt. But I mean, as a whole, it's like I think I mainly focused on just the idea specifically from the comics of just that the origin of Marc Spector reviving under Khonshu. But something I did purposely want to do in this, like in the comics, except for I think it was like one of the Avengers runs where he actually got really mystical. For the most part, it actually has been that, we don't know actually for sure if Khonshu gave him powers or not.
Yeah.
And I always really liked that mysterious aspect. So having him out there in the desert, on his own, dying and then reviving, kind of leaves that mystery, because it's like that idea of the unreliable narrator.
Yes.
And so I just kind of really took that approach, but then also at the same time in my mind having this idea that, yes, there is this power from the moon, that the moon is, affecting things going on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's really, I mean, a lot of Loonies, myself as well, I love that aspect of it. Granted, as you say, in that latest Jason Aaron Avengers run, Khonshu is established and he's well known. He's actually, for God's sake, he's in a prison on Asgard, so he's very real. I always like that kind of classic thing of that obscurity of, did Marc really die and be brought back, get resurrected by Khonshu in the desert, or did he kind of like, just fall down of fatigue and he somehow recovered and he thinks he was revived and he thinks he's got Khonshu, having his back and that. So I love that idea. But yeah, I mean, that's cool by then also tapping into the mystery of the moon and potential, having that fine line. That's a really interesting take. Steve, with preparing for the role as well, so both of you, obviously are well adept with the comics and drawing all the way back from to Fist of Khonshu, Steve. But was there anything that you did in particular to prepare for the role, in addition to basically knowing about the comics?
So one of the things that I was really looking forward to doing with this character is drawing on my background as a martial artist, being fortunate enough to have reached a point in my own training where I was being invited around the world to teach.
Nice.
And that opportunity to study a lot of the different fighting arts. In college, I was a history major, and I've always kind of been able to put my interest in martial culture and ancient cultures and societies. I've always been interested in how and why fighting systems develop. as much as what they are. So with this, I started looking at the different personalities, and I wanted to kind of give each side of the character their own fighting style. They have their own personalities. So when you see Moon Knight move, and he's Moon Knight, it's going to be different than when you see the way Jake Lockley moves. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that we were really, that Ian and I were exploring. It's like looking at these characters. Well, what are their personalities? What do we see? And then, how would they fight? How would they respond to a situation? So really just kind of looking at that and then picking kind of different fighting styles for them. And then for me, I started really looking into a lot of Egyptian fighting arts.
Oh, nice.
Especially some of the old ancient Egyptian stick fighting arts like Tatib, which is still done today, like more like a ceremonial type of dance almost. Mm-hmm. Goes back to a combative type of stick fighting. So when we see any truncheon or baton work, I'm really trying to base those movements in that style from what I've been able to see on that style. So yeah, just really want to find that ability to show these are different people. And, they're not just, he's putting on a suit, but he's, then doing a different voice. And now, but he kind of moves to say it's still this. No, like he really becomes somebody different in these different characters. And I wanted that to not just come across, as an actor, but also in their movement. And as a fight choreographer, I want those fights to tell a story. I want you to know when he is the fist of vengeance.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's another level of, because I always think it must be so gratifying as an actor, and I'm no actor, so I've never been in the position, but to play Marc Spector. I mean, how juicy a role is that? You get to explore all these different characters as well, but on top of that, and I think that really does. It really does help sell the character, and you've got that advantage of being a fight choreographer. So it's the movement, the different movements, the different ticks, that sort of stuff for each of the personalities. I think will go a long way. I can't wait to see it. Hopefully, touch wood. Speaking of which, we have, as you mentioned, the multiple personalities. Or we got Stephen, Jake, and Mark. Ian, who else is involved in Moon Knight Origins? For those that may not have seen, say, your Indiegogo page or your Instagram, who else is in the cast? They can divulge. I don't want no spoilers, but
yeah. So we're in the process of casting actually a Gina.
Nice.
So we will have Gina. We also will have some extra mercenaries who, essentially are the mercenaries, working with Mark and Bushman on that initial, that initial time when they're out in the desert, but also our interesting spin on casting, which kind of came in the midst of approaching a fan film in the midst of a pandemic, was for the Crawley character. Because we were finding we were having a really hard time essentially casting right off of, who Crawley is directly in the comics, as this older, almost crudgety looking homeless dude. So we started talking, about what to do because, I felt Crawley, is this very important character, street informant. So we ended up discussing and decided to go in this direction of essentially making Crawley younger, and then also making Crawley essentially almost more like a we were basically in between going with an actress or an actor. It could have gone either way, and we ended up going with this actress. So we ended up going in this very like almost Selena Kyle
Okay.
type of direction. So we have a Crawley, but it's still very much the heart of that character, with that street informant character. And I've taken still a lot of stuff from the comics, with even working dialogue between Jake and Crawley, with giving information, so that fans will still be able to see it there. But it's one of those funny things when you think about casting and the direction that it can go, and just how circumstances can just throw a loop.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But those are our major ones. Oh, and we also do have Peter and Marlene.
Yeah. Cool.
So those are pretty much the characters.
Yep. And I guess sorry.
And in fact, for Marlene, we have a pretty well-known cosplayer, Genevieve Marie.
Okay.
From Genevieve Marie Cosplay, and very talented. The cast is amazing. I'm so excited to work with the rest of them.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I actually realized I completely forgot to mention we will have Bushman.
Yes. Oh, well, I was about to say, look, he's got to be in their mix somewhere. But yeah. I'm sorry, Steve.
We should say anything or not. I'm like, did we keep him secret? Or
I
not?
know.
But yeah, we do.
I feel like it's important.
We're looking out for Bushman, and yeah, he is definitely going to make an epic appearance.
Nice, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, just on the fact, Steve, that you mentioned of Marlene Genevieve, and albeit she's not here to back herself up here, but like, so how did you find like working with her? Like, has she done some acting like before, mate, or cosplay, or is this her first time acting?
She's actually done quite a few things. I had worked with her on a feature film that is in post-production now, just finishing up some VFX. That I guess the best way I can explain that one is it's if Kung Fury got a little weirder. An action film.
Cool.
So she played one of the villains in there. And I've worked a few times with her doing live stage shows for Stan Lee's comic convention here. We would come in superhero stage show.
Cool.
So she's
nice.
During performance and to costuming.
You're gonna have to give me the links to to those projects, Steve, if you can, and if they're available, because I'd like to definitely share them around for people to have a look at if they're interested in this. Ian, you mentioned as well, just bouncing a little back to Crawley. It is interesting. I guess that was why I was asking about, are there any twists and takes, different takes on the characters or the story? Because I have in my mind, we had writer and director Caden Butera on the show a while ago. I'm not sure if you've seen any other Moon Knight fan films out on the internet. He released one. It's probably the most hits you'll probably, if you do a search for Moon Knight fan film, that's probably the one. But he got a lot of feedback, let's just call it feedback, for his creative license to change the costume. Now, I guess what I'm saying is, and I don't want to dissuade you in any way, but I guess, are you prepared for like fan feedback, with vigor?
Yes. So it's funny it's funny you mentioned that fan film, because that is because I did a lot of just trying to research what was out there already, what fan bases were out there, which is, how I found this podcast. I did watch that, and it's honestly, I think the one other well-made Moon Knight fan film out there. And I do remember seeing all the I guess you could call it backlash.
Yep.
I've also found posts from him, I guess, where he talked about why they changed it. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was interesting. And I've actually, talking with my overall vision with Steve, we go over stuff a lot. I've actually left a lot of the costuming of Moon Knight, Marc Spector, etc., that to him, because I know he has a lot of the knowledge into the comics too. And as you even mentioned, he even took that direction with the Marc Spector desert wardrobe. He knew exactly what he was doing. So I've left a lot of that to him, and he just updates me on what's going on with it. But with the Crawley character, I know for sure it is going to be the one element that will very much conflict fans. And I understand why that would be the case, but it's also a reality that we're not Disney and Marvel and we can't just do whatever we want. We don't have the funds, we don't have the resources, and it's like the circumstances pushed us in the direction. And as a filmmaker myself too, having made lots of short films that plenty of people have not liked, the reality is I know you can't please everybody. But sometimes I just kind of approach it as I hope most fans are pleased by this fan film. Yeah. Despite the Crawley change. Because that is the one change we have just due to circumstance.
Yeah. Oh, look, I think at the end of the day as well, you should be able to do what you want. It is a fan film. It's based on, your fandom of the character. It's a passion project, as you say. I say no, because speaking to Caden, when he was mentioning about that kind of backlash, for the costume change, it can potentially be disheartening, but again, at the end of the day, you have the freedom, I guess, to do that. It's your project, albeit the property is someone else's, but this is something that you've done, you've put in your blood, sweat and tears into. So I think, yeah, all for it.
Yeah. Well, and I guess partially too is I think you don't know what Disney's going to do to anything.
Yeah.
They've been changing stuff left and right.
Yeah.
So true. It's like,
true.
We're not doing anything crazier, probably not even as crazy as what Disney might do to a property that they have with Marvel.
Yeah.
And we really did try to still stick to the heart of who the Crawley character is with the changes. I literally have pulled lines, just, adapting them into a sensible coherence in modern scenes straight from the comics.
Yeah.
And I've done that with numerous things in the fan film, which is, I think, something people really love. Pulling a lot of stuff that people would have read directly in the comics.
Nice.
That will be right there on screen.
That sort of stuff.
Really bring in those elements that the fans are really going to enjoy. But like we were saying earlier, at the end of the day with the fan films, people just have to remember you're working with limited means, and a lot of times you have people that are working for free. So sometimes you're giving the best that you have available to you, and the fans can be hard to please. But at the same time, like you're saying, this is our passion project. Yeah. I personally would love to do a Moon Knight origin story set in ancient Egypt where we learn more about Khonshu.
That'd be awesome.
with Rami Malek. I would love to see Rami Malek as
yep.
who I would have cast personally. I love Oscar Isaacs and I'm excited to see what he does, but but like you're saying, at the end of the day, we were trying to finally do this in a very difficult time to get anything going. And we just decided that if we could find the right performer for the character, then it mattered less to us if they fit the traditional look of the character.
I'm very interested to see how Crawley is portrayed, but I know in safe hands. Speaking to you both, obviously have a reverence to the comic book material, and granted, there are some limitations when it comes to making. This is not like making a podcast, which is relatively cheap. This is a huge thing, and I'm always kind of wowed at directors, having to organize like it's such a big thing. You know, you've got to there's so much you have to do. Speaking of which, I just wanted to like go through, maybe understand a little bit of the process. Now, you mentioned you're about a third in, but take us through, I guess, pre-production, you know, storyboarding, concepts, stuff like that, to production, to the scenes that you have shot, and stuff like, I guess, costume design. In particular, I want to know your thoughts on the iconic Moon Knight costume, if we do see it, you know, at all, because that's a hard thing, I think, to put on screen. But yeah, take us through like pre-production, production, and what you hope for in post-production, what you hope to do.
So the filmmaking process, that's always something I've been doing it for so long now. Despite still being on the indie side, sometimes I do forget that a lot of people are not in the know of, you know, how it goes. And I'm always like, that's right, I need to remember that.
Yeah.
But so it's been an interesting process, especially with this one, because typically what you really want to do usually with the film, you know, is to have the script done and then, you know, get it all planned out, get all the storyboards, everything else before you start to really move into, you know, casting. And a lot of times you still end up with rewrites, you know, as you go. But this one has been interesting because there's just so many moving pieces with so much going on, so many different times. It's kind of been a bit more of like, sometimes my pre-production will still be happening for certain stuff later we have to shoot, while other things production are still happening. Because sometimes it's like, all right, this is the window we have for, you know, shooting this, depending on who we have involved in the scene, you know, who we have crew-wise that we need, you know, the location we have, when do we have it, and it'll be easier to just focus on, you know, okay, here's that scene, and not worry too much yet about exactly like, okay, here's this next scene we're going to be filming 3 weeks later. It's like, no, I can film this scene and then I can buckle on after that and really think about that scene. So it's an interesting kind of like jumping around, whereas usually when I'm making movies, it's like, all right, here's a few days and, you know, 2 to 3 days, bam, we're done. You know, we got the whole thing shot. That's usually how a lot of short films actually end up happening. Mm-hmm. But this one being, you know, so much more happening with limited resources and, you know, so many people doing it for free, we really have to work around, you know, schedules, and, you know, we don't have priority with, you know, some locations and things like that. As for post, what's kind of cool is over the years, I've been very fortunate to build up a small team of people that I know, you know, people who do sound and editing and, you know, things like that in post-production. And what is cool is I've worked with an editor for the past 7 years who has edited almost every short I've done since I've been out here in LA. And she actually works for a company that is doing big stuff. Like she worked on The Walking Dead. She's working on that new Isaac Asimov show as an editor. Yeah. So she, you know, is doing it professionally, and she's bringing that. She actually cut together the teaser trailer. And so bringing a lot of those people in to bring that extra level of quality to the project in post, even after all the production is done.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to, if we're talking like stuff in production, props and costuming and whatnot, I'm going to turn that over to Steve.
Yeah, well,
because he's been working on that crazy.
For sure, Steve. I want to definitely ask about you know, the mechanics behind the costume and stuff, but also how like you mentioned as well, getting those movements in, and also fight choreography. So how does that kind of factor into the pre-production side of things, with meeting up with the rest of the cast potentially?
Well, once we locked down what we wanted to do and we had the scenes, then I had to decide realistically who can I bring in to do this. We have a couple of fight scenes planned, and it was very important to me to call in favors with a lot of the stunt community here in LA and people that I've worked with before that I know are just going to bring, top-notch performances. So I know that I want the action to be very dynamic. And we are kind of going a little darker and grittier direction with this than I think we're going to see on Disney Plus. So the fighting styles are going to kind of be that same. And that plays a part in costume design, because then we don't have the luxury of a lot of CGI and a lot of like a whole design and wardrobe team. So I kind of got to build the costuming around what we can afford and what I can basically do myself. Mm-hmm. So building things that are also going to allow me to move with the fights. It's very hard to fight in a cape. It's just, it's really hard. And especially if you're talking about a character that's going to have a very, type of dynamic move. Mm-hmm. Superman doesn't need to be dynamic and super agile because, he's super.
Flick of a finger, he can knock you out.
So for me, I've looked at a lot of the different designs of the costume over the years. And, I also looked at what were some of the things that, they did in the MCU, but then also like other characters that are somewhat of that, relying on speed and agility outside of the Marvel direct superheroes, but like Snake Eyes, that's still mm-hmm. Marvel, but and other characters. Then looking at what's kind of cutting edge right now in military tech with body armor, because we kind of wanted it to have a realistic element, so it's not just going to be a spandex and cloth suit. He is going to have he's a mercenary, he's a soldier, and he is going to have his gear. So I started looking at things that would be both visually close to the to the comic, to where who this character is, but also both practical for us to film in and look like something that he would really have. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
I'm big on purpose. I'm sorry.
So we
want a big reveal. So I'm being egg about it, but
for sure.
The key elements are there.
Yes.
A cowl, a hood.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
We've got weapons. We're going to see him utilizing different weapons. We're going to see, the teaser does show a couple of the cave weapons. Mm-hmm. And the other things is I'll save it for people to watch the teaser, but there was another prop that took a lot of figuring out how to make because we needed this shot.
Oh, and you didn't have one?
We did not.
No, wow, okay.
That took me probably 3 to 4 months of trial and error.
Jeez, yeah.
Working on it quite a bit to get the finished look that ended up being layers of paint and washes and all sorts of.
It looks very good. I'm going to say that. So, listeners, if you want to know what, you're going to have to watch the teaser. So,
right,
yeah.
To the very.
I was going to say, and if you go to the Moon Knight Origin social medias, there is some video talking about it
mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Definitely go check it out as well. Look, again, for not wanting to steal any thunder, but can I ask both Ian and Steve, another thing that's usually kind of always fun with fan films is potentially seeing another character that's not potentially connected to Moon Knight, but is in the Marvel Universe. Is there anything on the cards there, or are we going to stay tight-lipped on that?
I'd say that's all up in the air. Okay. That's what I'd say.
Okay.
We have a few ideas.
Mm-hmm.
People that know their Moon Knight, if they pay attention to some of the names in the casting, they may see something familiar.
Oh,
they may not.
That's fair enough.
Again, it really comes down to we've decided that we're doing this project either way, and we've been pressing on. And with this Indiegogo campaign, I mean, it comes down to more money, more Moon Knight.
Yeah.
We're really enjoying doing this project, all the hardships aside. At the end of the day, we've had some pretty interesting, exhausting experiences doing this. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we look at the footage, and for me, it's like I get to do this.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah. Look, just a few more questions before wrap up and let you go, because I don't want to take too much of your time. I guess the first thing would be out of all this, what would you hope to for the Moon Knight fans to take away from this? Like, if there's something that you'd really want them to, after watching, come away with, what would that be?
For me, I would say I want them to look at it, and just looking from that trailer, I want them to get excited. I want them to feel what I feel when I watch something that I'm really been looking forward to, and get those goosebumps. And, just like that connection, that's ultimately what it is finding that connection through a character that, regardless of what our individual backgrounds are, we love this character. And that's kind of what I'm hoping we.
Yeah, nice. How about you, Ian?
Yeah, I'd say similar. I mean, just that excitement, especially with a character that has had so little screen time, and really, in comparison to a lot of other Marvel characters, just so little time out there, just in general. Yep. I mean, even at this point, it's like I didn't even know what the Guardians of the Galaxy was until James Gunn made a movie. Yeah. And then I found out apparently it was one of the worst Marvel comics that ever existed. And I'm like, and Moon Knight has only just about to see the light of day through Marvel.
Yeah.
And it's, way more exciting. So I think definitely that excitement, especially trying to bring some major characters to the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I guess just finally, if I can ask, I guess, what kind of look would you are you aiming for this overall? The style, I guess, of I don't know what I'm really saying, the aesthetics of the film. What are you aiming like to?
Mm-hmm. I guess as you can probably tell from the teaser, at least, obviously we're very much trying to make it cinematic. I think to an extent, I always wanted it to look cinematic enough that despite having less resources, it could feel closer towards something from a bigger company. Mm-hmm. And then also just going into this idea of it's not just an origin story. It really also does have a focus on the action centric aspects of Moon Knight and his personalities, and we have actually worked in ways, even if at times it's small, to see the different ways that each personality moves. Even Jake Lockley, like how does he move differently than even Marc Spector does? And of course, some of the cinematic look, it very much helps having these cinematic locations that we've been able to get to. But there's definitely this balance between that, having that action focus, but also have it being focused on that, story of, essentially the Marc Spector Moon Knight journey, Marc Spector to Moon Knight. But it's essentially this back and forth of seeing, who he was and who Moon Knight is now.
Yeah.
But it's definitely gonna also have that grittiness. So, a gritty, action-centric, character-focused film, essentially.
Cool. And sorry, there was just one other thing, one last question. It was dangling in the back of my mind. And again, if you can divulge, the span of it. So we know Origins, but you also mentioned the likes of Crawley and Gina. So what's the time span of the film? What can fans look forward to from the time seeing the statue of Khonshu up until?
I mean, essentially, we're playing with a back and forth timeline.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So essentially playing with the, present now that, Moon Knight's a bit more established, and the past of, exploring that journey of, how Moon Knight became Moon Knight with some with some takes on, the ideas of, how he found his weapons and things like that.
Okay.
And how that may have, inspired him later on becoming, the Avatar, Vengeance of Khonshu.
Okay, plenty to look forward to then as well. Like it didn't occur to me, I don't know why, but just looking at the trailer and Moon Knight Origins, I was just imagining just basically origin, but having the back and forth, I mean, of course that makes sense. So plenty to look forward to.
See him as Moon Knight. And, like we were saying earlier, this process has been a little different than a lot of standard filmmaking because we keep coming up with scenes that we're like, oh, we could do this one.
Ah, right.
We've got the people already. We've got the gear. We could sneak a night in here and there. So you get to end up getting to see even more of the backstory before he's putting on the suit.
Yeah.
But that's... We've got a good bit in there. We'd love to be able to delve more into some of the other characters. Just it is a short film.
Yeah,
maybe some can do a feature length.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, it certainly sounds like a very exciting venture. Loony listeners, again, I urge you to check out the Indiegogo page, check out the social media pages, Facebook, Instagram as well. Ian, Steve, thank you so much for taking your time to come onto the show. It's just been really cool.
Yeah, I wanted to just tease real quick.
Yep.
We should have some teasing images of Moon Knight soon.
Oh, really? Nice. Okay. Well, I'm going to have to lurk behind your social media pages, and once I get them, I'll post them up share them onto our social media platforms. But nice. That's very cool. But yes, thank you so much, guys, for taking your time. I can't wait to see it. And yeah, listeners, you have about a week or so, maybe a little bit over a week, to throw some dosh on Moon Knight Origins way. But a huge thank you to both of you guys.
Thank you. That was fun.
You really enjoyed it.
Hey everyone, this is Brian, the host of Inner Demons, the Ghost Rider podcast. And since 2017, Inner Demons has been the best place on the web for news, reviews, and regular discussion with our listeners about Marvel's Spirit of Vengeance, Ghost Rider. You can find us on Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and many other podcast catchers, as well as on Twitter @InnerDemonsGR. Remember, listening to your inner demons is not always a bad thing. Ride on.
Hello, everyone. This is Steve Huff. I'm the fight choreographer, and we'll be playing Marc Spector, Moon Knight, and Jake Lockley in Moon Knight Origins. And you're listening to the Into the Night podcast.
Yes, welcome back, Loony listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. This is just on the flip side of that awesome chat I had with Ian Adema and Steve Huff from Moon Knight Origins. A really fun chat to get to know those guys and to learn a lot more about their Moon Knight project. So as mentioned, this is like a bonus episode. It's kind of, you probably noticed it's kind of slipped in a little before our usual programming. So next phase, we'll be back on schedule doing our idle chat, which will be I guess it will drop very quickly after this one. And I'm joined by fellow Aussie, big Moon Knight fan himself, Andrew Shaw, and we'll be looking at Moon Knight's fighting skills as the weekly topic. That's an interesting one, just to see where he kind of factors in compared to the rest of the Marvel characters in the Marvel universe, hand to hand, street level. So we got some feedback there from a lot of loonies, so looking forward to that. As mentioned in the chat with Ian and Steve, look, there are links in our show notes of both Ian and Steve's work, as well as links to the Indiegogo page where you can consider funding helping to pledge the Moon Knight Origins fan film. It certainly sounds like a good venture. The teaser looks brilliant, so it's worth checking out, Loonies. I urge you. Hopefully these guys can get across the line, and hopefully we see a finished product. But all the links will be there, as well as their social media platforms on Facebook and Instagram. As always, another big thank you to our Patreon members. So on patreon.com/ITK Moon Knight, you too can become a Patreon member, or a patroni, as I like to call it. I like to call our Patreon members, and just check out our bonus incentives, and hopefully there's plenty there for you to choose from, as well as there being enough incentives for you to consider maybe throwing some coin. And look, I always just love that you are listening to the show, and I cannot be grateful enough for that in any instance. Also as well, Hello Headphones, one of our sponsors. If you use the code ITK Moon Knight, you will get a 10% off their online store for all your audio and headphone needs. And Dreamland Comics from Illinois, if you use the code MOON, you'll get 20% off their online store. So any of your back issues that you are missing, any of your Marc Spectors, any of your Fist of Khonshus, go hit up Dreamland Comics. We're also affiliate members of Entertainment Earth, so any of your action figure needs, check them out. Links in our show notes. If you use that, that will help prop up the show too. And finally, we are members of the Collective. Look, it's an informal podcast network. We haven't got like a dedicated page for it. You know, we all aren't under the same, I guess, domain name, but we do help each other. So you'll see a lot of crossovers, you see a lot of plugs for the other shows as well, and they're highly recommended. So the likes of Adelan Rising, a comic book podcast, or if you look towards say the Signal of Doom, comic and geek culture podcast, and finally TV podcast industries, those great blokes over there, Derek, John and Chris, doing tireless work to bring you the best content and discussion for TV shows and movies. And you can contact us if you want to. Let us know your thoughts on the Moon Knight Origins. Are you excited for it? If you have any other questions, just drop us a line. Email itkmoonnight@gmail.com. We got a Facebook page and group. We're on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Discord. Get vocal. We have a website, new website coming very soon, and also on Podchaser. And as always, if you do consider writing in a review for the show on either Apple Podcasts or Podchaser, that will really be beneficial and would be very, very much appreciated. It will just help us get out there for any other loonies that may not know about the podcast and listen to podcasts. So anyway, Loony listeners, thank you for that. Thank you for joining. Thank you for that. Thank you for joining and listening to a really cool discussion. Hopefully, it will kind of get the juices flowing. And we'll see you very shortly for our episode 226 with Andrew. But before that, may Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. Catch ya.
Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.